creating a video that will kind of serve as a different training video or informational video that teachers can use to learn all about today's high leverage practice. Alright, so today's high leverage practice comes from Chapter 7 of the textbook, High Leverage Practices for Intensive Interventions. And this high leverage practice is a part of the different social, emotional, and behavioral high leverage practices. This one is establishing a consistent, organized, and respectful learning environment. All right, so jumping into it, here's some general information. Um, with this high leverage practice, teachers attempt to establish, teach, and reinforce class-wide expectations, rules, routines, and procedures. This is done to ensure that most students can successfully navigate the classroom environment without any additional support. Now, this doesn't mean that not every student, no students will need support. I'll come back to that again a little bit later, but there, of course, will be students that do need additional support to successfully function within the classroom. Following that up, teachers, when they're coming up with their expectations for the classroom, they can create and share a draft of those expectations with families and students for feedback. This kind of reflects back to the different collaboration high leverage practices. Once again, they're all kind of tied together and relate to one another. They don't exist in a vacuum. They're kind of an interconnected web, is one way to think of them. All right, moving on to that. So a big principle behind this high leverage practice is the function contextual thinking, FCT. Now, this is a framework for considering the function of a student's behavior and identifying strategies for students who need additional help to be successful in a classroom. This helps enable the teacher to better select strategies that align with individual students' challenges. This is important because some intervention techniques won't work or may even make the behavioral problems more severe, which is frustrating to everyone involved, both teachers, students, parents. Um, Now, in order to do that, there's some helpful questions to guide teachers' understanding of context. One is the expectation or routine age appropriate? Two, does the student actually have the skills required to perform this routine? Three, if the student has the skills, is the student sufficiently motivated to follow the expectation or routine? Four, are there specific data patterns that indicate the student is struggling to follow expectations during specific times of day, in specific locations, or around specific people? And five, are there barriers in the environment that prevent the student from meeting the expectation or following the routine? Um, so these questions are really important for understanding the context in which different behaviors arise. Furthermore, understanding this context will help identify additional instruction that will match a student's needs. It allows you to more specifically tailor your intervention approach or your instructional approach to a student, make it more individualized. Following that, there are the ABCs of behavior. So A stands for antecedents, which are events that prompt or trigger the behavior. B stands for behavior, which are measurable and observable actions that describe exactly what the student is doing. And C, there's consequences, which are what happens right after the behavior is performed. Moving on, there's a couple of different questions related to the ABCs of behavior. Um, so when a teacher identifies necessary ABC related information and formulates a hypothesis about the function of behavior, they can identify different strategies to answer these following questions. One, how can I change my classroom environment to promote appropriate behavior and prevent inappropriate behaviors for my students? Two, what else do I need to teach my students to perform instead of the problem behavior? And how will I teach it? What would it look like to teach expectations, rules, and procedures on a more intensive and individualized level? Three, when students perform the appropriate replacement behavior, how do I respond to ensure that students will perform that behavior again in the future? How do I respond to problem behaviors to make sure that I reduce the probability it will happen again in the future? Um, Now, these are helpful in you coming up with your different um, strategies you use to address behavior from students. But the different strategies you use will depend on context and what is feasible for you, the student, and in the classroom in general. Um, but in general, you want to monitor um, the strategies impact by using data collection. So once again, referencing the different data collection high leverage practices. Now, one of the strategies you could use with working with students is pre-correction. This is also called a pre-correct. So this is a strategy in which the teacher tells students what the expected or desired behaviors prior to the start of an activity, routine, or transition are. The textbook gives an example of a teacher um, talking to their students about transitioning from the classroom to the lunchroom. And so the teacher here talks and says, as you walk through the hallway, please remember to stay on the right, keep your hands by your side, and walk quietly so we don't disturb other classrooms. Um, so that's you're kind of outlining the specific behaviors you want to see from your students. Um, Following up on that, the textbook, I'm going to quote from it here. It says, quote, when pre-correction is followed up by behavior-specific praise, students are more likely to repeat behaviors that were prompted. Using the cycle of pre-correct, monitor, and praise, teachers can shape student behavior to become routine or automatic, end quote. So this approach is pretty effective, especially for students with more intensive needs. Um, for students with more intensive needs, pre-correct should directly align with the already pre-existing classroom expectations and rules. Um, these pre-corrects may also need to be provided more frequently, um, and something else important to note is that pre-correct should always be delivered in a respectful manner and tone. Um, All right, another strategy teachers can use is choice. And choice is a strategy in which teachers allow students to make choices. It's a form of preventative strategy that promotes cooperation, task engagement, and reduces disruptive behaviors. Now, there are a couple of different steps that you can take to incorporate choice in the classroom. One is create a range of choice options you would be willing to provide students with within the routines you have established in the classroom. Two, look through the list of options prior to implementing a particular routine or procedure. Three, decide which choices can be offered for the specific routine or procedure. Four, decide which choice-making opportunities fit best with your routine or procedure. And lastly, five, provide the choices as planned while implementing the routine or procedure. Um, so, an example of this could include allowing students to either choose to complete an assignment in a group or doing it individually. There's a couple of different other options this might manifest as, but that's just one option of many. All right, another strategy teachers use is called task analysis, which is a process for identifying specific steps required to perform a specific task. Um, Now, this is useful, especially for when students struggle to complete a classroom routine. Um, so, there are some steps here that you can take to follow through with task analysis. So, these are one, Identify the expectation, procedure, or routine that is difficult for the student. 2. Identify the prerequisite skills and materials needed to teach the task. 3. Break the expectation, procedure, or routine into discrete steps. 4. Teach the task analyzed routine by modeling each step to the student. 5. Implement the routine and monitor progress. 6. Reteach each step as necessary until the student is able to independently complete the routine. Um, so over time, both the teacher and the student can utilize this task analyze routine or procedure into a tool to monitor students' progress towards independence. All right. Another strategy teachers can use is called individualized point chart. So, an individualized point chart is a strategy that is aimed at increasing motivation for students who have the skill but lack the motivation or incentive to engage in the skill. Um, so, this might look like students receiving points for completing tasks or demonstrating effective behavior. These points can then be traded in for future rewards. For example, I might have a student who knows how to write, but they don't really like writing. So I can say, like, if you write this paragraph here, a 5 sentence paragraph, I'll give you a certain amount of points, and then they can trade that in for a reward. Um, oh, Over time, uh, as the student becomes more fluent in the skill, the point system can be phased out or can be brought back in depending if there's a new skill being learned. As such, it's kind of flexible. And I forgot to mention the different awards. They don't have to be big. They can be pretty small. It can be something like um, being able to listen to music during individual task time, or being able to have lunch in the classroom. It doesn't have to be something big. It can be small, but it should be something that the student likes and might get enjoyment out of it. All right. Another skill teachers can use is the PSST, which stands for Problem Solving Skills Training. Now, this is a strategy used for responding effectively when challenging situations arise. So, all these previous strategies I've listed are good preventative measures, but sometimes even the best preventative measure doesn't always work. So, of course, there will still always be challenging behaviors that we must respond to effectively. So, a way to do this is that after a problem has occurred, the teacher and the student, 1. Discuss the problem that occurred. 2. Consider what to do differently. 3. Brainstorm possible solutions. 4. Select the best possible solution. And lastly, 5. Put the solution into practice and evaluate its success. Um, this strategy and process is beneficial for students who are unfamiliar with both the process of problem solving and the emotional regulation skills that are required during problem solving. So this is a good way to kind of teach students how to work through their own problems, so that at some point in the future they, won't require the teacher intervention or teacher support. It's something that they'll be able to do by themselves. And the last thing that this chapter mentions and the side leverage practice mentions is the importance of cultural considerations. Cultural considerations are an element of function control thinking, going back to FCT. Um, During this, the teacher should consider the degree to which expectations, daily routines, and practices are influenced by their own cultural background and upbringing. The job of the teacher is to learn about the community, the families, and the histories that the students come from. This helps identify whether a student's struggles to meet expectation are due to a cultural mismatch. Um, I'm going to quote from the textbook here. It says, quote, once expectations and routines have been established, continued considerations of cultural relevance should be the norm, end quote. Um, yes, it's really important. So all of these strategies are a part of the high leverage practice of um, establishing consistent, organized, and respectful learning environment. And that's it for this high leverage practice.